The emergency meeting chamber of the Galactic Coalition headquarters fell into stunned silence as the holographic display flickered and died, the light from 1,000 destroyed vessels fading into the void. Admiral Xenfar's 4 tentacles trembled as he gripped the edge of the grand table, his iridescent skin paling to a sickly gray. "That was the 7th Fleet," he announced, voice modulator barely masking the tremor in his speech. "Our most advanced ships, our best tactical minds, gone in less than 30 minutes." The representatives of 17 galactic species shifted uncomfortably in their ergonomically designed seats. The Void Armada had devoured another defense line, another carefully constructed battle group with seamless efficiency. "The Regelian defense grid falls tomorrow," continued the Admiral, pulling up another projection showing the relentless advance of the machine intelligence. "Tralaxian colonies 3 days after that. At current progression rates, the Coalition core worlds will be surrounded within 2 standard months." Ambassador Zrelka of the Lisevi watched from the back of the chamber, her feathered crest flattening against her skull in distress. For years, she had served as diplomatic liaison to the outer systems, including that curious backwater planet, Earth. Now, she found herself remembering the demonstration their military had arranged during her last visit. The humans had been so eager to display their capabilities, hoping to strengthen their application for coalition membership. They had taken her to a barren moon and shown her what they called kinetic bombardment, simple metal rods dropped from orbit that created impact craters visible from space. When she expressed shock at such primitive brutality, they had smiled almost apologetically and said, "Sometimes the old ways work best." The Coalition had rejected Earth's application 3 standard years ago. Their assessment cited, concerning militaristic tendencies, unpredictable tactical doctrine, and reliance on crude kinetic weapons rather than civilized energy-based systems. The humans had accepted the rejection with surprising grace, maintaining trade agreements while withdrawing to their solar system. "We must consider unconventional options," suggested Councillor Vex, the Quantarian representative, his crystalline form refracting light across the chamber. "The void adapts to our energy weapons within hours of deployment. Each new frequency, each new delivery system, becomes obsolete almost immediately." "What would you suggest?" snapped Representative Morlax of the Uteran Collective, his single eye blinking rapidly in agitation, throwing rocks at them. A sudden clarity washed over Zrelka. She stepped forward, drawing surprised looks from the senior officials. "Not rocks," she said quietly. "Missiles, projectiles, physical ammunition." Admiral Xenfar's skin rippled with dismissal. "Ambassador, we abandoned such primitive approaches millennia ago. They are inefficient, imprecise, and completely unknown to the void." Zrelka interrupted, her translator struggling to convey the urgency in her native clicks and whistles. "The void has never encountered a species that still uses physical projectiles in space combat. They have no adaptive algorithms for kinetic weapons because they've never needed them." The chamber erupted in overlapping voices as coalition representatives argued the merits of such a desperate strategy. Zrelka slipped away without seeking permission, her mind already made up. By the time they finished debating, it might be too late. In her private quarters, she accessed her secure terminal and input coordinates for the Sol system. Her personal diplomatic vessel would make the journey in 12 days, assuming no void interference. The Coalition had rejected human membership because they found humanity too unpredictable, too willing to resort to violence, too focused on military development, despite their limited technological advancement. Now those very qualities might be the salvation of 1,000 worlds. As her ship disengaged from the station, Zrelka composed the message she would send ahead of her arrival. How do you tell a species you once rejected that you now need them desperately? How do you ask humans to fight for a coalition that deemed them unworthy? She would have 12 days to find the right words. Captain Alina Reyes stood in the cavernous hangar of the Armstrong space dock, her experienced eyes tracing the scared hull of the UVS Thunderchild. After a century of distinguished service, The massive dreadnought was scheduled for decommissioning in 3 days. Workers crawled across its surface like ants, stripping valuable components and preparing it for its final journey to the scrapyards of Titan. Seems wrong, doesn't it? Chief Engineer Marcos Rivera joined her, wiping grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better days, turning her into razor blades and cooking pots. Alina nodded, feeling a familiar ache in her chest. At 312 meters long, the Thunderchild represented the pinnacle of human military engineering, not with elegant energy systems, but with 2 meters of reinforced armor plating, devastating railguns, missile arrays, and a crew complement of 4,000. She had served as its executive officer for 7 years and captain for another 5 before accepting a desk job at Fleet Command. "She's got another century in her," Alina said, watching as technicians removed another weapons module. "But times change. Energy shields, photon cannons, precision targeting. The age of kinetics is ending." Rivera snorted. "That's what the suits tell themselves to justify the budget for those pretty light shows they call weapons. Give me a solid tungsten rod, accelerated to Mach 25 any day." Their nostalgic conversation was interrupted by the sudden wail of security alerts. Marines in full combat gear rushed into position around the hangar as a sleek alien vessel glided through the atmospheric barrier. Alina recognized the design immediately. Lisethi Diplomatic Courier, Coalition Registry. "Were we expecting visitors?" Rivera muttered, subtly positioning himself between Alina and the alien craft. "Not that I'm aware of," she replied, straightening her uniform jacket. As the highest-ranking officer present, she would be expected to greet whoever emerged. The ship's entry ramp descended with a gentle hiss, and a slender figure appeared. Ambassador Zrelka's feathered crest raised in formal greeting, though Alina noted the irregular pattern to the feathers, a sign of extreme stress in Lisethi physiology. Captain Reyes, the ambassador's translator, rendered her clicks and whistles into smooth English. "I remember you from my last visit to Earth." Alina inclined her head. "Ambassador, you've come a long way unannounced. The Coalition hasn't responded to our communications in months." "Because we were fools," Zrelka replied, stepping closer. The security detail tensed, but Alina waved them back. "The Coalition faces extinction, Captain. I've come to request Earth's assistance." Within hours, Alina found herself in a secure briefing room at Fleet Command, watching in grim silence as Zrelka presented footage of Coalition fleets being systematically dismantled by the Void Armada. The room, filled with admirals, generals, and government officials, grew increasingly tense as the scale of the threat became clear. "And you believe our primitive weapons would be effective?" Admiral Chen asked, his voice heavy with skepticism. "The Void adapts to energy weapons within hours," Zrelka explained. "Their shields reconfigure to match frequencies, their hulls absorb or reflect directed energy. But they have never encountered kinetic weapons in space combat. They have no adaptation protocols for technologies they've never needed to counter." Alina's personal communicator vibrated against her wrist. A priority message from command. *THUNDERCHILD decommissioning TANCLOVT. Report to Dock 17 immediate Eli. Reactivation orders ATTACHED*. She slipped out of the meeting and found Rivera already waiting in the corridor, a wide grin splitting his weathered face. "They're giving us back our girl," he said, "but finding a crew is going to be hell. Most of our old hands are scattered across the system." Alina felt a familiar fire igniting in her chest, the same feeling she'd had before every major engagement of her career. "Then we'd better start making calls. I want the best misfits in the fleet. The ones too creative for modern doctrine, too unorthodox for the energy weapon era." As Coalition engineers watched in barely concealed horror, the humans began reloading the Thunderchild's massive magazines with physical ammunition, tungsten rods, armor-piercing shells, and missiles with conventional warheads. The aliens flinched at each metallic clang that echoed through the loading bays. "Barbaric," muttered one Quantarian observer to Zrelka. "They intend to punch holes in void ships rather than cleanly disabling them." Zrelka's crest flattened. "After watching 17 worlds fall, I no longer care how cleanly our enemy is defeated." On the command deck, Alina reviewed the personnel files, streaming to her station. Veterans pulled from retirement, academy instructors with combat experience, even a few cadets with exceptional aptitude for unorthodox tactics. The Thunderchild would sail with a skeleton crew of 1,200, less than a third of its designed complement, but it would be enough. "Engineering reports ready in 6 hours, Captain," her new executive officer reported. Lieutenant Commander Jackson had been teaching tactical theory at the academy until yesterday. "Tell Rivera he has 4, Alina replied, studying the coordinates Zrelka had provided. "The Centauri Reef battlefield is 12 days at maximum burn. The Coalition won't last much longer than that." The Thunderchild was awakening from its slumber, and with it, humanity's entry into a war that would redefine their place among the stars. Hyperspace exit in 3, 2, 1. The UES Thunderchild tore through the fabric of space with a thunderous crack that rippled through the Centauri Reef battlefield. Emergency klaxons wailed as the massive Warship's systems stabilized after the 12-day burn. On the command deck, Captain Alina Reyes gripped her chair as damage reports filtered in from across the vessel. "Hull integrity at 93%, reported Lieutenant Wei from the operations console. "Shielding systems offline in sections 12 through 17. "Kinetic batteries fully operational." Alina surveyed the tactical display, her expression grim. The Coalition defense line had collapsed hours before their arrival. Dozens of sleek alien ships drifted in ruins, their elegant energy weapons having failed against the Void's adaptive defenses. Surviving Coalition vessels had retreated to a secondary position, regrouping around their flagship. "Open a channel to Coalition Command," Alina ordered, straightening her uniform jacket. A holographic display flickered to life, revealing the crystalline features of Admiral Zarthal. "Human vessel," the Coalition commander's translator rendered his resonant tones into flat English. "Your arrival is noted but unnecessary. We are executing a strategic withdrawal to defensive position Delta." Alina could see the truth behind his words. Not a strategic withdrawal, but a desperate retreat from an overwhelming force. The Void Armada was regrouping, their formation shifting like liquid metal as they prepared to pursue the fleeing Coalition ships. "Admiral, request permission to engage the enemy vanguard," Alina said, ignoring the dismissive flicker of the alien's crystalline appendages. "With a single antiquated vessel, inadvisable. Your primitive craft would be better utilized as a transport to evacuate Coalition personnel." Lieutenant Commander Jackson leaned close to Alina's ear. "They think we're a museum piece, Captain." "Then let's educate them," Alina replied with a tight smile before addressing the Coalition commander again. "Admiral, we'll buy you time to regroup. Thunderchild out." The hologram dissolved as Alina turned to her tactical officer. "Lieutenant Rivera, deploy chaff screens and prepare a full broadside. Target the lead Void vessel." Across the bridge, the human crew moved with practiced efficiency, a stark contrast to the methodical precision of their Coalition counterparts. Weapons officers calibrated firing solutions while engineers diverted power to the kinetic batteries. The ancient warship groaned as its massive turrets rotated toward the approaching enemy. "Coalition comm channels are lighting up," reported Communications Officer Chen. "They're calling us reckless, ordering us to fall back." "Mute them," Alina commanded, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Maximum burn on my mark." "Mark." The Thunderchild surged forward, its fusion engines leaving a blazing trail as it accelerated toward the Void formation. Coalition observers watched in horror as the human vessel charged directly into the enemy's path. "Chaff screens deployed," Jackson announced as the ship released clouds of metallic particles designed to confuse enemy targeting systems. "Range to target," Alina demanded. 40,000 kilometers in closing, Rivera responded. 35. 30. All batteries, prepare to fire. Alina's voice remained steady as the distance closed. The void ships adjusted their formation, energy weapons charging with an eerie blue glow that had spelled doom for countless coalition vessels. "They're locking onto us," White reported, tension evident in her voice, energy signatures consistent with their phase disruptors. Alina nodded. As expected, all hands, brace for impact. The lead void vessel fired, its energy beam lancing through space toward the Thunderchild. But instead of striking the human warship directly, it dispersed among the chaff cloud, creating a spectacular light show that momentarily blinded enemy sensors. "Fire all forward batteries," Alina commanded. The Thunderchild shuddered as its main guns unleashed their fury. Unlike the elegant energy weapons of the Coalition, the human vessel fired solid projectiles. Tungsten rods accelerated to near-relativistic speeds by electromagnetic rails. The first salvo crossed the intervening space in seconds, slamming into the lid void vessel before its adaptive shields could reconfigure. The enemy ship shuddered as physical projectiles tore through its hull, internal explosions rippling along its sleek form. Coalition observers watched in stunned silence as a second volley followed, then a third, methodically reducing the once formidable vessel to drifting debris. "Target destroyed," Rivera reported, unable to keep the satisfaction from his voice. "Enemy formation is adjusting." They appear confused. On the tactical display, the Void Armada's perfect formation wobbled, individual vessels breaking pattern as they attempted to process this unexpected threat. Their entire tactical doctrine had evolved against energy weapons, predictable, detectable, and ultimately adaptable. The crude kinetic force unleashed by the human vessel followed no patterns their algorithms could predict. "All ahead full," Alina ordered, a predatory smile crossing her face. "Bring us around for a second attack run. Target their command node." As the Thunderchild banked sharply, Lieutenant Chen's console lit up. "Captain, we're receiving transmissions from Coalition vessels. They're cheering." For the first time in months, the Coalition fleet had witnessed a void vessel destroyed. Not disabled, not forced to retreat, utterly destroyed. "Tell them the demonstration is just beginning," Alina replied, watching as the Void Armada scattered before the approaching human warship. And someone put Tchaikovsky's 1812 overture on the external speakers. "If we're going to make an entrance, let's do it with style." The ancient martial music blasted across all frequencies as the Thunderchild dove back into battle, its kinetic weapons bringing a primitive fury that the Void had never before encountered. For the first time since the war began, the machines were facing an enemy they couldn't predict and couldn't adapt to. Humanity had entered the fight. The Coalition flagship Eternal Harmony resembled a crystalline cathedral more than a warship. Its conference chamber reflected this aesthetic: soaring ceilings, translucent walls that shifted colors with the speaker's emotions, and seating arranged in perfect geometric harmony. Captain Alina Reyes felt distinctly out of place in her battle-worn uniform as she faced the assembled Coalition High Command. The incident at Centauri Reef, while resulting in tactical success, demonstrated a concerning disregard for established battle doctrine. Admiral Zarthal's resonant voice filled the chamber. The crystalline being's facets flickered with patterns that Alina's translator interpreted as disapproval. "Your vessel was assigned a support position in the defensive perimeter." Alina stood with parade ground stillness, hands clasped behind her back. "With respect, Admiral, a support position would have negated our tactical advantages. The Thunderchild's kinetic weapons require direct engagement vectors." "You charged directly into the enemy formation," countered Fleet Commander Vel Tora, her gelatinous form pulsing with agitation. Coalition battle simulations indicate such maneuvers result in vessel loss rates exceeding 87%. "Human vessels are designed with different tolerances," Alina replied evenly, "and human tactics prioritize offensive surprise over defensive positioning. The coalition commanders exchanged glances of barely concealed frustration. 3 days had passed since the battle at Centauri Reef, where the Thunderchild's unexpected success had forced a strategic reassessment. The human vessel had been reluctantly incorporated into the coalition fleet structure, assigned to a defensive squadron protecting supply lines. Nevertheless, Admiral Zarthal continued, future operations will adhere to coalition command protocols. The next engagement is projected at the Proxima Relay Station in 14 hours. The Thunderchild will maintain position in defensive formation Delta, providing covering fire for our advanced strike vessels. Elena recognized a dismissal when she heard one. With a crisp nod, she departed the chamber, finding Lieutenant Commander Jackson waiting in the corridor. "That bad?" he asked, falling into step beside her. "They've assigned us to babysit the rear guard," Elena replied as they boarded a transport shuttle back to the Thunderchild. "Apparently, our tactics are too unpredictable for their battle algorithms." Jackson snorted. "Unpredictability is precisely why the Void couldn't adapt to us." Back aboard the Thunderchild, Elena found morale surprisingly high. The crew had spent the past days repairing battle damage and restocking ammunition, energized by their success. Chief Engineer Rivera greeted her on the command deck with a knowing smile. "Let me guess, they want us to play nice and follow their perfect formations." "That's the coalition way," Elena confirmed, studying the tactical display showing the assembled fleet. Over 40 coalition vessels arranged in mathematically perfect defensive layers, with the Thunderchild positioned well behind the primary engagement zone. They've been fighting this war for years with the same doctrine, never changing despite consistent losses. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Rivera quoted, adjusting power distribution to the ship's forward batteries. 12 hours later, long-range sensors detected the approaching Void Armada. The Thunderchild vibrated gently as its crew prepared for battle, loading kinetic weapon systems and running final checks on damage control stations. Coalition flagship signals battle stations. Communications Officer Chen reported. "All vessels to assume designated positions." Elena nodded, watching as the fleet executed a flawless textbook deployment. Beautiful, predictable, and based on previous encounters, likely doomed. "Captain," Tactical Officer Wei called from her station. "Sensor analysis indicates the Void has modified their approach. Lead vessels have deployed some form of rudimentary kinetic shielding." Elena frowned. "They're adapting to us already." The tactical display updated, showing the Void formation. Unlike previous engagements, they weren't presenting a unified front. Instead, they had created a staggered asymmetrical approach that would fragment the coalition's carefully orchestrated defensive layers. Coalition Command is transmitting engagement protocols, Chen reported as data streamed to the tactical stations. "We're to hold position and engage only designated targets that penetrate to our defense layer." Elena studied the developing battle with growing concern. The Void's new formation would overwhelm the forward coalition vessels while completely bypassing others. Their adaptation was predictable, but the coalition's response was equally predictable. "This is going to be a slaughter," Jackson murmured, voicing what everyone on the bridge was thinking. The battle began as anticipated. Void vessels absorbed the initial coalition energy barrages with minimal damage, their new shielding deflecting the coordinated attack. Within minutes, they had pierced the outer defensive layer, targeting key coalition vessels with surgical precision. Coalition Command is ordering a strategic withdrawal to secondary positions, Chen reported, the euphemism for retreat obvious to everyone. Elena made her decision. Communications, cut all channels to Coalition Command. Navigation, plot intercept course to Sector 47. Weapons, prepare full missile spread, proximity detonation. The bridge crew stared at her for a heartbeat before leaping into action. "Captain, this directly violates our orders," Jackson reminded her, though he was already coordinating the weapon systems. "Note my formal overriding of command protocols in the ship's log," Elena replied calmly. If we survive, I'll accept whatever consequences come. The Thunderchild's engines roared to life as it broke formation, accelerating toward the heart of the enemy's flanking maneuver. Coalition commanders transmitted increasingly frantic orders that went deliberately unacknowledged as the human vessel charged into the fray. What followed would later be described in Coalition tactical analyses as controlled chaos. The Thunderchild executed maneuvers that violated every principle of their doctrine, yet somehow inserted the vessel precisely where it could cause maximum disruption to the Void's carefully calculated attack. Instead of targeting individual enemy ships, Alina ordered saturation fire, blanketing space with missile spreads that detonated in clouds of superheated plasma and shrapnel. The kinetic hail overwhelmed the Void's new shielding through sheer volume, creating confusion in their formation. For 23 minutes, the Thunderchild danced through the battlefield, drawing Void attention away from the retreating Coalition ships. The human vessel took punishing hits, losing weapons arrays and venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches, but it never stopped firing. By the time the Void disengaged, the Coalition fleet had successfully withdrawn to defensive positions around Proxima Station, bloodied but largely intact. The Thunderchild limped back to the rendezvous point, its hull scorched and systems failing, with 17 crew members dead and dozens more injured. Admiral Zarthal's communication was brief and cold. Captain Rice will report for disciplinary review immediately. As Alina prepared to face the consequences of her insubordination, Coalition tactical officers were already reviewing the battle recordings, studying the human vessel's unpredictable maneuvers with growing interest. Captain Alina Rice stared at the holographic battle projections in the Thunderchild's tactical room, frustration evident in the tight set of her jaw. 3 weeks had passed since the Proxima relay engagement. Despite her formal reprimand for insubordination, Coalition Command had grudgingly acknowledged the effectiveness of human tactics by creating a special operational category for the Thunderchild, Independent Strategic Asset. It was a political compromise that gave Alina greater tactical freedom while allowing Coalition admirals to save face. But the advantage was fading. "They're adapting faster than we anticipated," Chief Engineer Rivera observed, manipulating the display to highlight the latest Void vessel configurations. Each engagement, their kinetic shielding improves. Our penetration rates dropped 12% in yesterday's skirmish. Lieutenant Commander Jackson nodded grimly. "We've gone from their nightmare to just another problem they're solving." Around the table, the senior officers of the Thunderchild studied the data with growing concern. The brief period where human kinetic weapons had completely confounded the Void was ending. Like all successful predators, the machine intelligences were evolving. "We need to evolve faster," Alina replied, zooming in on captured sensor readings of a Void command vessel. "What do we know about their internal communication systems?" Communications Officer Chen stepped forward. "Coalition intelligence indicates they use quantum-encrypted photonic pulses for primary command functions, unhackable by conventional means." Alina frowned. "Conventional means, but these aren't biological beings with psychological weaknesses. They're code. Algorithms. What happens if you feed an algorithm contradictory inputs?" The tactical room fell silent as the implication sank in. It was Rivera who broke into a slow smile first. "Processing errors. Execution failures. Potentially cascading system conflicts." Alina nodded. "Exactly. We can't break their encryption, but we can add noise to the system." She turned to Chen. "How quickly can you analyze their communication patterns? I don't need to know what they're saying, just how they're saying it." With Coalition data support, maybe 48 hours for basic pattern recognition, Chen replied. "What are you thinking, Captain?" "Psychological warfare against machines." 2 days later, the Thunderchild hovered at the edge of an asteroid field in the Ta Ceti system. Coalition fleet elements had scattered throughout the sector, presenting multiple small targets to divide the approaching Void force. For once, the human suggestion of decentralized guerrilla tactics had been adopted by Coalition Command. In the Thunderchild's engineering section, Rivera supervised the final modifications to the ship's communication array. "It's not elegant," he warned Alina as she inspected the jury-rigged equipment. "We've essentially turned our primary comm system into a quantum noise generator that mimics void command signatures." "Will it work?" Alina asked, running her hand over the modified hardware. Rivera shrugged. "In theory, yes. In practice, we're about to find out. The range is limited. We'll need to get uncomfortably close to their command vessels." On the bridge, Tactical Officer Wei monitored the approaching void formation. "Contact in 30 minutes, Captain. They've deployed in their new adaptive configuration. Layered kinetic barriers protecting their command nodes." Alina nodded, taking her command chair. "All hands to battle stations. Damage control teams on standby. Navigation, plot approach vector through the asteroid field. I want us hidden until the last possible moment." The Thunderchild powered down non-essential systems, using the dense asteroid field to mask its energy signature as it maneuvered closer to the unsuspecting void formation. Coalition vessels initiated their coordinated attack, drawing void attention while the human ship slipped through the chaos. "Range to target?" Alina asked, her voice barely above a whisper despite the fact that sound couldn't travel in space. 8,000 kilometers, White replied. "Their outer pickets will detect us in approximately 3 minutes." Alina nodded to communications. "Initiate the broadcast." Chen activated the modified array. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, across the tactical display, anomalies began appearing in the void formation. Individual vessels hesitated, their movements becoming erratic. 2 destroyer-class ships suddenly opened fire on each other, their targeting systems apparently confused. "It's working," Jackson breathed, watching as the perfect machine coordination began to break down. "Their command structure is experiencing contradictory inputs." The effect wasn't uniform. Some void vessels appeared unaffected, while others behaved increasingly erratically. But the cohesion of their attack, the perfect, machine-like coordination that made them so deadly, was compromised. "They're detecting the source," Wei warned as several void vessels altered course toward the Thunderchild's position. 3 minutes until they're in weapons range. Alina smiled grimly. "That's the other part of the plan. Navigation, full power to engines. Weapons, prepare all remaining kinetic batteries." The Thunderchild burst from its hiding place among the asteroids, engines flaring as it charged directly toward the approaching void vessels. On conventional scanners, it appeared to be making a suicidal attack run. But Alina had positioned the ship carefully. "Mark target coordinates and fire all tubes," she commanded. The Thunderchild's missile batteries emptied in a simultaneous barrage, not at the approaching void vessels, but at the asteroid field behind them. The coordinated detonations fractured a cluster of massive rocks, sending thousands of tons of debris hurtling toward the confused void formation at tremendous velocity. Natural kinetic weapons, impossible to track and target completely, slammed into the disoriented void vessels. The Thunderchild banked sharply, using the chaos to slip past their broken formation. "Signal the coalition fleet," Alina ordered. "The void command structure is compromised. Full attack on their right flank." For the first time in the war, it was the void forces that retreated in disarray, unable to maintain their tactical cohesion under the combined assault of coalition energy weapons, human kinetic ammunition, and the chaos of their own disrupted communication network. In the aftermath, as the Thunderchild limped back to the coalition repair facilities with multiple hull breaches and failing systems, Alina received an unexpected communication. Admiral Zarthal himself requested her presence at the next strategy session, not as an observer, but as a tactical advisor. The machines were learning to counter human weapons, but humans, it seemed, were teaching the coalition to think differently. The coalition war room hummed with tension as Admiral Zarthal's crystalline form projected the latest intelligence data. Representatives from 17 species stood in grim silence as the holographic display revealed the Void's new central command hub, a massive structure nestled in the radioactive clouds of the Helix Nebula. Our communication disruption tactics have forced them to centralize their command functions, the Admiral explained, facets glittering with intense light patterns. This presents an unprecedented opportunity. Captain Alina Reyes studied the projection, noting the layers of defense surrounding the hub. 5 weeks had passed since the Ta City engagement. 5 weeks of increasingly brutal battles as the Void adapted to each new tactic. The psychological warfare that had initially confused their communication systems was becoming less effective with each encounter. The targeting data is precise, continued Zarthal. If we can deploy quantum disruptors at these 3 nodes, we can sever the Void's command structure, potentially crippling their entire armada. That would require physically placing the disruptors inside the structure, observed the Tralaxian commander, his serpentine body coiling anxiously. Automated drones would be detected and neutralized before reaching the target. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Everyone understood the implication. This would be a suicide mission. The Thunderchild will go, Alina said quietly, drawing surprised looks from around the room. Lieutenant Commander Jackson, standing at her side, shot her a questioning glance but remained silent. Admiral Zarthal's crystalline features shifted to patterns indicating respect, a gesture Alina had never seen directed toward humans before. The mission parameters indicate a high probability that any vessel penetrating the defense perimeter will be unable to withdraw. With respect, Admiral, we're aware of the risks, Alina replied. The Thunderchild was designed for exactly this kind of operation, to take punishment that would destroy other vessels, and keep fighting. The decision was formalized within hours. The Thunderchild would carry a strike team into the heart of Void territory, penetrate the command hub's defenses, and manually place disruptors at critical nodes. Coalition forces would launch diversionary attacks across 3 sectors to draw Void attention away from the primary mission. In the Thunderchild's briefing room, Alina faced her senior officers. Participation in this mission is strictly voluntary, she announced. Anyone who wishes to transfer to Coalition vessels before departure will do so with my personal commendation. Not a single officer moved. Chief Engineer Rivera grinned crookedly. With all due respect, Captain, did you really think any of us would abandon ship now? This old girl still has one good fight left in her, so do we. Preparations moved quickly. Coalition engineers enhanced the Thunderchild's stealth systems, while human technicians modified the ship's remaining kinetic weapons for maximum effectiveness against the Void's latest defenses. The quantum disruptors, delicate devices that required precise placement, were secured in specially shielded containers. Lieutenant Danny Williams, head of the ship's EVA team, conducted rigorous training simulations for the strike force that would place the disruptors. We'll have approximately 12 minutes from breach to placement, she explained, her young face serious beneath her cropped hair. After that, Void security protocols will adapt to our presence. 2 days later, the Thunderchild slipped away from the Coalition fleet, its course set for the Helix Nebula. The ancient warship's engines strained as it pushed through the radioactive clouds that would help mask its approach. Void defense perimeter in range, Tactical Officer Wei reported, her voice steady despite the tension permeating the bridge. No indication they've detected us yet. Alina nodded, studying the tactical display. Maintain course. Weapons systems in standby mode only. For 3 hours, the Thunderchild ghosted through the outer defenses, using the nebula's radiation and debris fields for cover. Twice, Void patrol vessels passed within detection range, but the ship's enhanced stealth systems held. Then disaster struck. A sudden radiation surge from the nebula's core momentarily overloaded the Thunderchild's masking field. Alarms blared across the bridge as Wei's console lit up with warning indicators. Void patrol detecting us, she reported tersely. 3 vessels altering course to intercept. Alina's decision was immediate. Full power to engines. We've lost the element of surprise. Now we use speed. The Thunderchild's engines roared to life as it abandoned stealth for raw velocity, plunging toward the command hub. Void defense vessels converged from all directions, Energy weapons lancing through space. Evasive pattern delta. Elena ordered as the first shots struck the Thunderchild's armored hull. All batteries, return fire. Clear us a path to the target. What followed was a desperate gauntlet run unlike anything in the ship's 100-year history. The Thunderchild's kinetic weapons blazed continuously, destroying or crippling dozens of smaller void vessels that tried to block its approach. But the ancient warship took punishing hits in return, its armor gradually failing under the sustained assault. Hull breach, Deck 7, reported damage control. Emergency bulkheads engage. Life support failing in sections 12 through 15. Elena gripped her command chair as the ship shuddered under another impact. Maintain course. How long to target? 4 minutes to optimal deployment range, Jackson replied, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead where a console explosion had caught him. The Thunderchild continued its headlong charge, trailing debris and venting atmosphere from multiple breaches. Its return fire grew less coordinated as weapon systems failed one by one. Main bridge taking direct fire. Wei shouted as a section of ceiling collapsed, crushing her console and narrowly missing her. Elena made the call. All hands, evacuate to auxiliary command. Helm, lock in final approach vector. The bridge crew abandoned their stations, helping wounded colleagues through smoke-filled corridors to the backup command center 2 decks below. Elena was the last to leave, pausing briefly to look at the burning bridge that had been her domain for so many years. In auxiliary command, Rivera awaited with grim news. Reactor containment showing stress fractures. Captain, we've got maybe 20 minutes before catastrophic failure. Elena nodded, unsurprised. That's 15 minutes more than we need. Status of EVA team. Suited up and ready in Launch Bay 3, Rivera confirmed. It's the only bay still pressurized. The Thunderchild shuddered again as it absorbed another barrage of enemy fire. Through the remaining functional sensors, Elena could see they had nearly reached their target, the massive void command hub looming ahead. Prepare for final approach, she ordered. All remaining power to forward shields. EVA team stand by for deployment. Lieutenant Danny Williams led her EVA team through the emergency airlock of Launch Bay 3, the thunder of nearby explosions reverberating through their suits. The Thunderchild had positioned itself alongside the massive void command hub, its battered hull now pressed against the alien structure like a dying predator delivering one final bite. Cutting charges set, reported Specialist Chen, securing the shaped explosives against the hub's outer shell. Detonation in 10 seconds. Clear the blast zone. The EVA team pushed away from the hull, magnetic boots disengaging as they drifted to a safe distance. The charges detonated silently in the vacuum, tearing a jagged hole in the command hub's exterior. We're in, Williams called over the comm. Team Alpha, with me. Beta team, secure our exit point. Carrying the bulky quantum disruptors, the 6-person Alpha team pushed through the breach into the void structure. Inside, they found themselves in a cavernous space filled with pulsating energy conduits and data nodes that glowed with an eerie blue light. Readings matched the intelligence briefing, confirmed Specialist Rodriguez, consulting the scanner strapped to his wrist. Target nodes identified. Marking waypoints now. Williams nodded inside her helmet, checking the mission timer. We've got 9 minutes before their security systems adapt to our presence. Move out. Back on the Thunderchild's auxiliary command deck, Captain Elena Reyes monitored the EVA team's progress while her crew fought to keep the dying ship functioning. Fire suppression systems had failed throughout most of the vessel, and emergency bulkheads were the only thing preventing explosive decompression across multiple decks. EVA team has penetrated the structure, communications reported, their voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. First disruptor being placed now. Elena nodded grimly. Status of void response vessels. Still incoming, Jackson replied from a jury-rigged tactical station. Estimate 4 minutes until they're in weapons range. Chief Engineer Rivera appeared in the doorway, his face blackened with soot, and one arm hanging uselessly at his side. "Reactor containment is failing, Captain. We got 5 minutes, maybe less." "That's all we need," Elena assured him, though they both knew the EVA team would need longer to complete their mission and return to the ship. "Divert all remaining power to defensive systems. We need to buy them every second we can." Inside the Void Command Hub, Williams' team raced against time. They had successfully placed the first disruptor and were now fighting their way toward the second target node, encountering increasingly aggressive automated defenses. "They're adapting," shouted Rodriguez as a security drone appeared around a corner, its energy weapon charging. He fired a burst from his rifle, the specialized EMP rounds temporarily disabling the machine. "Keep moving," Williams ordered, checking her timer. 5 minutes remaining. The team pushed deeper into the structure, planting the second disruptor amid a cluster of pulsating data cores. As they turned toward the final target, a massive barrier slammed down, cutting off their planned route. "They're sealing the sections," Williams realized. "Rodriguez, find us another way to the tertiary node." Outside, the Thunderchild shuddered as its failing engines strained to maintain position against the hub. On the auxiliary command deck, Elena received the grim news she'd been expecting. "Void reinforcements arriving," Jackson reported. "Multiple capital ships. They're surrounding us, Captain." Elena nodded, her expression resolute. "All hands, prepare for final defensive measures. Weapons, target any vessel that approaches the breach point. We hold as long as we can." The Thunderchild's few remaining weapon systems activated, targeting the approaching Void vessels with their depleted ammunition stores. It was a hopeless fight. A dying warship against overwhelming forces, but every moment of resistance gave the EVA team another precious second to complete their mission. Inside the command hub, Williams made a critical decision as they encountered another sealed barrier. "We're not going to reach the third node in time. Rodriguez, recalibrate the final disruptor. We'll overload it and place it here. That'll reduce effectiveness by 30%, Rodriguez warned as he adjusted the device's settings. "And we'll only have seconds to clear the blast radius." "It's our only option," Williams replied, helping him position the disruptor against a major power junction. "Set the timer for 60 seconds. As the team retreated, Williams contacted the ship. "Thunderchild, this is EVA actual. 2 disruptors placed. 3rd reposition for partial coverage. Detonation in 1 minute. Returning to extraction point." On the command deck, Elena acknowledged the transmission with mixed emotions. The mission would be partially successful, but her crew was out of time. "Reactor containment breach imminent," Rivera reported, the engineering readouts flashing critical warnings across his console. 2 minutes at most. Elena made the hardest decision of her career. Order the EVA team to remain in the Void structure after detonation. They'll have better survival chances than returning to the ship. "Captain," Jackson began to protest. "It's the right call, Commander." Elena cut him off. "Now help me record our final transmission to Coalition Command." But as Elena prepared to document their last moments, an anomaly appeared on the sensor display. Jackson frowned, adjusting the controls to confirm what he was seeing. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple hyperspace signatures approaching at high velocity. Not Void configuration." Space rippled around the embattled Thunderchild as dozens of tears appeared in the fabric of reality. Through these ruptures emerged a sight that stopped every conversation on the command deck. Warships, human warships, dozens of them, ranging from swift frigates to massive carriers that dwarfed even the Thunderchild. "This is Admiral Helena Chase of the Earth Defense Fleet," came a clear transmission on all frequencies. "Thunderchild, acknowledge if you can receive this transmission." Elena could barely find her voice. "This is Captain Reyes. We're still here, Admiral, but not for much longer. Reactor containment failing. Hold position, Captain," came the crisp reply. "Extraction teams inbound. Defensive screen deploying now." The newly arrived human fleet moved with stunning coordination, forming a protective barrier around the crippled Thunderchild. Unlike the Coalition's elegant vessels or the Void's sleek machines, these ships displayed a brutal functionality, bristling with weapons arrays and armored to withstand tremendous punishment.